All right, welcome everybody to our maiden voyage here. We just got our one-on-one interview studio up and running, and we are going to call this segment Justice Matters One-on-One. And we're going to be bringing folks into the studio here, and I am thrilled because today's maiden voyage, we're going to start with Harry Dunn, former U.S. Capitol Police officer. This is a man who truly needs no introduction. There aren't many people that you can legitimately call American heroes. Harry Dunn is one of them. You all know that he stood strong on January 6, 2021, and defended not only the U.S. Capitol, not only all the people in the U.S. Capitol, but in a very real sense, he defended our democracy. And I am so excited that on the eve of what will be a very dark anniversary, the 4-year anniversary of the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, we're going to open our one-on-one interview series with Harry Dunn. So, Harry, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here, brother.
Thanks for having me, my friend. Glad to be here. Really honored to be talking with you, and shout out to your guests. You guys, your listeners. You have some amazing listeners and some very smart ones too. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate all their support too.
Yeah, well, we all appreciate you and all of the other officers who were at the Capitol standing strong that day. Our friends Mike Fenon and Aquilino Gonell, Daniel Hodges, Caroline Edwards. I hesitate to start naming them because there are so many heroes that day.
Sure. I'm glad that you brought that up. A lot of times people, Harry Dunn, I didn't do anything by myself. Like, there are hundreds of men and women from Capitol Police, Metropolitan Police, whose names you'll never know. And I even in my book, that's what the dedication is to the men and women whose names and faces you'll never know, but deserve every bit of credit that I'm getting, that the people that you named are getting. I shout them out too.
Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you to recount or relive what you went through on January 6th. I think most of our viewers have heard you talk about it. We've seen you testify before the House January 6th House Select Committee. We saw you in those public hearings. We saw you on the Hill day in and day out supporting your fellow officers. We've also seen you on TV. You've become, in many regards, one of the most vivid faces of the police officer victims, and I hate to call officers victims, of what happened that day on January 6th. We see you on TV sort of, keeping that flame alive because, this is a history that we cannot forget, particularly as we're about to enter the second sort of dark phase of a Donald Trump presidency. I've also had the opportunity to see you testify in criminal trial after criminal trial in my former backyard, the courts of Washington, D.C. So rather than ask you to relive and recount what happened that day, I want to start where you started in your book, which I've now read admittedly a couple of times, and I hope most of our viewers have picked up a copy because this is history. This is something that we need to remember, and we need to work our asses off to prevent it from happening again. This is Harry's book, Standing My Ground. I want to start where you start in your book, which was a little bit of a surprise to me when you started there. So let me just read a short passage. You say, "We need to talk about our trauma." Yes, you and me. You may not think you're experiencing it, but you are. Ask yourself, what has this nation been arguing over for the past 2 years? What conversation has been dominating the media and the government, occupying our courts and our daily conversations, and even separating our friends and family? What is the subject we promise ourselves to avoid with strangers? January 6, 2021. That's what the dictionary says trauma is, a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And then you follow that up, Harry, with the only difference between your January 6th trauma and mine is where we were when we experienced it. That wasn't how I was expecting your book to open. Why did you decide to open with the trauma that you and that we all are living with?
So one of the things that I've always said about January 6th is, as the police officers, we did our job, but we did our job to protect democracy. And democracy represents everybody. So whether you voted for Donald Trump in that election, whether you voted for Joe Biden in that election, your voice was counted, was heard, and everybody was affected by it. Like it when you do your job as a police officer, you protect people. You work on protecting people. But on January 6th, we saw what happened we had never seen. It was an attack on democracy. They were there, in their own words, the rioters, to stop the steal because they believed the election was stolen. So that means the people who voted for Joe Biden, your vote, they wanted to overturn that. And Donald Trump fought for that in Georgia and all these fake elector states. Donald Trump fought to have people's voices not heard. And people saw the attack on the Capitol. Even people that voted for Donald Trump could not believe what they were seeing. That was you shouldn't have that. So everybody was affected that day. Sure, the police officers took the physical brunt of it, but it was an attack on everybody who participates in democracy. So I wanted to include everybody in that because you have a role. And that's what I've always said. Everybody has a role in protecting democracy. And when democracy is under attack, everybody that believes in it is a victim.
And I think you're right. Everybody has suffered trauma, not as directly as you and your 139 fellow officers who were injured that day. Some damn near killed, some lost their lives not long after our friend Mike Fenon, who, I worked murder cases with Mike Fenon in the streets of Washington, D.C. when he was an MPD officer and I was a federal prosecutor. So I've known Mike a very long time, and they damn near took his own life. And there's another passage in your book where you say something like, they weren't trying to push past Mike Fenon to get to the Capitol. They were trying to kill Mike Fenon, including with his own gun. That's not about trying to just get through the police line so you can stop the certification, stop the steal. That was about doing real harm to the men and women who were protecting democracy.
And that's one of the points that I always wanted to make. It wasn't, people were the violent criminals, the violent people. Like you said, they weren't there to stop the certification. They were there to wreak havoc, to cause hell, to beat the hell out of Mike Fenon. We were outnumbered. So they could have easily, Mike Fenon was down. So, okay, he's down, keep moving. No, they were circling back and going back and attacking him while he was down. And many other officers too. They had the opportunity to just go inside. But there were so many, a lot did go inside. But there were several who said, no, I want this violence. I want this attack. I want this shit show to continue. So they beat the hell out of officers, defenseless officers, who were already outnumbered.
So Harry, let me ask you this. If you think back 4 years ago now, just a few days before the January 6th Capitol attack, what did you envision your career to be moving forward? At that point, you'd already been a Capitol Police officer more than a dozen years. You'd been protecting and serving. Obviously, nobody was expecting January 6th to play out the way it did. If you can think back to before it all broke bad on January 6th, what did you envision your career to look like?
I thought that I was going to be, after 20, 25 years of service, signing off on the radio. Hey, this is badge number 6288, 10-7 remainder. It's been a great career. I thought that I was going to spend the rest of my working career with the United States Capitol Police. And I tried to, even after January 6th. I was there 3 years before I quit. 3 years. I tried to maintain it, but I realized I got to do more because people on the right or MAGA world, Republicans, have accused Democrats of dragging on January 6th. Oh, y'all won't let it go. We need to move on. I would love nothing more than to move on from January 6th. But you can't move on until you corrected what happened and you hold the people wrong accountable. And also, on that note, Donald Trump hasn't let January 6th go. Every minute he gets an opportunity to talk about the hostages and pardoning the people. Every time he gets that opportunity to blame somebody else for it, he does. So while he's continuing to talk about it, lie about it, I'll continue to be out there telling the truth about it.
So before I move on to a really dark topic, and that is Donald Trump's incessant promises and pledges of love and pardons for the January 6th defendants, whom he calls hostages and patriots. See, I got to get my blood pressure back down now.
I tell you, bro.
We're gonna get there, but you know what? I want to just spend another minute on the work of Capitol Police officers, because as a career prosecutor in D.C., I had the honor of working with all of the law enforcement agencies in D.C., not only the Metropolitan Police Department. Those are our local partners in crime fighting, and particularly the men and women of the homicide division of MPD. Those are my people. They speak for the dead each and every day.
Yep.
But I worked with your colleagues at Capitol Police. For example, we would have people go into House buildings and Senate office buildings and steal stuff, and then we would be working those theft cases. I had senators and congressmen as witnesses and victims in some of my crimes. Never got to work with you, but I got to work with Detective Smitty and some of the other great old detectives at Capitol Police. And also we get to work with Park Police and FBI and DEA and ATF and Marshal Service and Secret Service Uniform Division. You know, you name it, Amtrak Police, Postal Police, Smithsonian Police, and on. And
people
Metro
don't realize how many law enforcement people are in D.C., different agencies, and it's a
vibrant place to work. But only one prosecutor's office who gets to work with all of those agencies. But here's why I want to drill down on what you got to do as a Capitol Police officer, because you mention it in your book, and it's not intuitive. It's not the kind of thing that we necessarily think police officers are focused on day in and day out. And here's what you say. I quickly learned that one of my main jobs at the Capitol is to protect your right to free speech. And then you go on to say, in the end, you understand that people need to be able to come to the U.S. Capitol and express their displeasure. That's not the kind of thing we necessarily think of police officers doing when we think about protecting and serving. Correct. You're protecting and promoting their right to come and disagree with what the government's doing, maybe even with what you all are doing. Talk a little bit about that responsibility.
Well, that's what, I'm glad you used that word, that responsibility, because it's a giant responsibility that every American, every person in America has that right to come out there and express their free speech. Obviously, there are limits to it. You can't yell fire, but you're able to express your displeasures, and that's what makes, I hate saying this, makes America great, but it really does. People are allowed, and we're able to take criticism. Police officers, prosecutors, you're able to take that criticism where you may not like what I'm doing or you may not like me, and you have the right to express that to me. But you can't come in there and beat the hell out of me, because you can't. So people would protest at the Capitol, things that I was for, things that I was against. I was protecting members who I liked, who I didn't like, or like their policies, or even to be blunt, ones that I didn't like, that cared for, they weren't nice, good people. And I was responsible, that responsibility, protecting people. You have to I love the phrase when they say country over party, because you have to look at the big picture. It's not about me. It's about people being able to continue to express their freedoms, their First Amendment rights, and their displeasures or their pleasures, which were few and far between at the Capitol. But that it's a hell of a responsibility that I took very seriously, because people's voices and their votes is one of the strongest tools that they have.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Before I move on to pardons, let me just ask you: when you look back on January 6, 2021. What is it now that sticks with you? What is it that comes to mind for you as we approach this dark anniversary?
So I went through a whole gambit of emotions when January 6th happened, from shock and disbelief immediately, to sad, to I can't believe this was happening, crying, to anger, to I can't believe this is what the response to what January 6th was. I can't believe that response, to activism, to do some. After this election, when they reelected Donald Trump, I pivoted. I had it in my mindset. Maybe it wasn't intentional or not, but I couldn't believe, and I got frustrated that so many people in this country didn't think that what happened on January 6th meant enough to not elect him president. So many people, I took it as a personal insult to me, to my coworkers, to the men and women of the Capitol Police, DC Police. I took it as a personal insult that so many people didn't hold him accountable. We had the opportunity to hold him accountable, regardless of what happened in the courts. The people had the opportunity to hold him accountable, and they didn't. And if you look, 20 million people sat out this election. That 20 million less that voted in the previous election. I don't know if that's exact. I believe that's the number I saw. 20 million less people voted in this election. And that level of indifference about what, I get angry at those people. Now, Donald Trump is who he is. Like, if he's a snake, I don't get mad if a snake, you don't get mad if a snake bites you. Why are you mad at the snake? The snake did what he's taught to do, what he does to survive. Donald Trump is who he says he is. There's no surprises with him, right? I'm upset. I'm surprised that the people who didn't stand up, in my opinion, and fight back against him. That's where the disappointment. I felt let down by the American people. Not all, obviously not all. There are millions and millions and millions of people who reject that, support me, support Kamala Harris, despise what happened on January 6th, and I appreciate that. But so my message is to the people who did not, and that's where my hurt comes from, because I expected more from them.
Speaking of the person Donald Trump is, after telling people that, lying to people, telling them their vote was stolen, their election rigged, their favorite president was being wrongly taken from them, after telling them to, go to the Capitol, fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore, now go stop the steal. He knew it wasn't a steal because all of his officials and agencies had told him it was not a rigged election. There was no fraud undermining the election's results. And let me just add as a footnote, when he used that word steal, that's evidentiary gold to a prosecutor because it proves his criminal intent. He knew he was lying about the results of the election, but he told them, go down there and fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Now go stop the steal. And they went and they beat the hell out of our men and women trying to, upend our democratic process. And now those very rioters, call them even co-conspirators that he launched on the U.S. Capitol that day, he is pledging pardons when he is sworn in. We don't know if he's going to make good on that threat or not, but I'm taking him at his word. What is it that you think of and your fellow officers think of when you hear that kind of reckless, obscene pledge by Donald Trump?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was out campaigning as hard as I could, because this isn't new. He said this, there was a campaign promise. He said that they didn't do anything wrong. So I knew that this was coming. So it's like the blow has already been softened because I was preparing for it. But also, and I'm glad we're having this conversation because maybe you can explain it to me a little better. With pardons, it doesn't erase your guilt. It just says, I forgive you for what you did, but you're still guilty. So if I can take just a little small nugget of when the jury of those people's peers knew that they were wrong. So in society's eyes, they were wrong for what they did. Now you want punishment and sure like that and pardon, just say, hey, we forgive you. No, we don't forgive you. You were found guilty. And the jury of your peers got it right. With that said, I'm not surprised. I'm upset. I'm almost numb to it, Glenn. Like, I'm almost numb to it. Like, these people, Donald Trump was saying that those people were patriots. And this is 4 years in the making. This wasn't just him immediately or in the campaign trail saying, I'm numb to it. It makes me angry. It makes me angry, so I guess I'm not numb to it because I'm angry, right? But I keep going back to the people, American people, who did not do their job. We had an opportunity to stop this. And this wasn't the court system. This wasn't, I hope the judge rules. This wasn't that. People just had to show up and reject that type of behavior, that type of rhetoric, the belief that he should pardon people who beat the hell out of us. I guess I say I'm numb to it, but yeah, it makes me angry still to this day. But I'm not surprised though.
Well, let's hope that he's got somebody inside his administration. Goodness knows who with this clown car of people he's intending to nominate, who says, you can't pardon people who damn near beat police officers to death who are trying to protect the democratic process. I'm not optimistic, and as a former career prosecutor, I'm kind of allergic to pardons because I know the work that goes into a successful investigation and prosecution. You've got victims, you've got witnesses, you've got grand jurors, you've got trial jurors, you've got court staff, you've got a community you're there to protect, you've got wrongs you're there to vindicate, and all of it gets wiped away by a corrupt president with a signing of a pardon. That is something that I don't think we should ever have to endure. No victim should have to endure it. So we'll see how that plays out. All right. As we begin to wrap up, Harry, I'm going to take the interviewer's privilege.
Okay.
And ask you about your time as an offensive lineman
Wow.
at JMU.
Wow.
I was down the road.
Go Dukes, baby.
I was down the road playing at W&L University.
Yes, yeah.
Now, if we stood up next to each other, people wouldn't believe that we were both on the offensive line. I was a center. You were a tackle. Just talk for a minute about how special it is being an O-lineman.
I will say our center on our team was the shortest guy out there too, but one of the biggest hearts and one of the biggest fires in his bellies you've ever seen. But that group of O-linemen, those 5 people that go up there and put the weight of the success of the team on our shoulders, and we take such pride in. It was the pride of being an O-lineman. Because the quarterback doesn't look like a stud unless the O-line's good. The running back doesn't look like a stud. Like, everybody knows those guys' faces. But you let some of the best linemen of all time walk around, nobody knows who they are. They could walk around in public. Nobody, you're a big guy. Did you play football? Yeah. At a real high level, too, and very good. But just the pride. And that's the thing. O-line doesn't get credit. No. The quarterback does. They get those big contracts, and that's okay. And that's and I feel like that's how it transferred into where I am now. Yeah. I don't care about no credit. I just want to see things succeed. And then intrinsically, I know it's because of the work that I did. And as an old lineman, like, some of the best feelings, if you made a great block, nobody's even looking at it, but in your mind, I just killed that guy. Oh, it was great, But love it. Love the grit, the pride, the determination. Like, I don't know. It was a game. It was Arizona State versus Texas that just came on. And there was a lineman. He almost suplexed his running back into the end zone. It was a big pile up, and the lineman just picked his guy up and fell backwards within the end zone. And I noticed it, but nobody else. Everybody was talking about, look at that running back. No, did you see the lineman pick him up? And so that's what I like. I like the grit, the hard work that comes with being a lineman.
Talk about being part of a team, part of something bigger than yourself. And that's policing, that's democracy, and that's playing on the O-line. Like you say, the center, the 2 guards, the 2 tackles. We had our saying, O-line to the goal line. Every
I loved it.
game, and we took pride when we would go to the locker room at the end of the game. We'd be all dirty and muddy and nasty and bloody, and there, people chewing on us and stuff. And if we looked at our quarterback and his uniform was nice and clean, it's like, you know what? He's going to get the interview. They're going to take the pictures of him. But we know who's responsible for that. There's something very special about that.
And people, like, I think about when people talk about Tom Brady and Peyton. Like, if you look at some of their best highlights, they are standing untouched in the pocket. Brady looked like a god in that pocket at times, just standing there. Why? Because the people around him made sure of that. And those people around him, O-line, baby. That's it, man.
All right, Harry, two last questions.
Sure.
First of all, one of the things that we're focusing on here every day, and we will for the next 4 years as we enter this sort of the Trump-induced darkness. We know it's coming, right? We're not pretending it's going to be...
Well, some people know what's coming. his loudest critics, like yourself, me, people that were on the front line warning about what a second Trump, we know it's coming.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going to find out the hard way.
His supporters, perhaps most of all, are going to suffer and struggle, and I don't wish that on them either, but I think they're about to find out.
When they find out the hard way, though, we try to tell them. Yeah.
So now, one of the things we're trying to do every day is focus on whatever points of light we can find, we can feed, we can support, because we're going to have to try to pierce the darkness with whatever points of light we can find. So whether it's personal, professional, political, what kind of points of light do you see out there that we can grab onto and maybe feed and support?
I'm glad that you said that, because after the election, I was crushed. And, everybody's looking for somebody to stand up and give us a moment where I take a different approach. Allow yourself to feel miserable. Like, you shouldn't feel good. Like, you should be crushed. Don't stay there, though. There's work to do. Even if it's as bleak as times may seem, you have to continue to fight and find those, like you just said, those beams of light, something, and go towards the light, make that light bigger, continue to grow it. And I'm motivated by all the people who are still supporting me and like, what can we do now? People that ask the question, what can we do now? Okay, you still want to fight. And going back to football, as long as I got one or two people that are willing, who's going to fight with me? And that's what we're looking around for. We look around for the helpers. And that motivation has been great, even after the election, because I thought so many people would be ready to pack it in. No, we have to get ready. There's a midterms in 2026. Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity let's continue to fight more. The sun comes up tomorrow, and we need to be ready to fight the day head on.
Love it.
Yeah.
Last question. What's next for Harry Dunn?
Man, it's a great question. I'm figuring it out. Like I said earlier, I told you that I planned on being a Capitol Police officer for the rest. I didn't want to have to worry about finding out what's next. I do know that I want to be helpful, and I will continue to fight. So I'm continuing to. I got my Substack that I do, Standing Our Ground. I host Clean Up on Aisle 45, and just continuing to be a voice. But I do want to be effective. I found out over these last 4 years that my voice, people want to hear it, and I'm appreciative of it. And it's important to let people know. Never forget January 6th. Never forget there were real people there. There were real victims. And just to continue to be, I'm a public servant, man. I'm a public servant when it comes down to it. And I just want to help and be helpful. And I would love to see what's out there to continue to be helpful. I have my PAC, Democracy Defenders, which is all about electing good candidates, anti-MAGA candidates, pro-democracy candidates. Just do whatever I can. So I'm still looking and waiting to see what opportunities come about, but I am always going to be there in the fight to show up and be ready.
And we're always going to appreciate you in that fight. We're going to have your back. You had our back on January 6th and beyond. I appreciate you helping me launch Justice Matters One-on-One. I will put in the description of the video both a link to Harry's book, Standing My Ground, and to his Substack, Standing Our Ground, and also to his PAC. So it'll be one-stop shopping if you want to go support Harry. And keep fighting, my friend.
That means a lot to me.
Keep fighting.
Thank you,
fighting.
my friend.
All right, good seeing you.
Yes, sir.